Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Athletics Weekly podcast, brought to you in association with the Keely Klassic. My name is Euan Crumley, and in every show we bring you everything you need to know from the world of run, jump and throw, analysing the biggest stories and speaking to key names from the sport. In this episode, we're joined by not one, but two special guests who are looking to have a fresh impact on athletics in the coming weeks and months. Olympic 800-metre champion Keely Hodgkinson tells us more about the new event she's put her name to, the Keely Klassic, while multiple Olympic and World Sprint champion Michael Johnson discusses the Grand Slam track project that is creating plenty of interest even before a step has been run. We're also at the point in the year when the indoor athletics season really starts to get off and running, with elite athletes beginning to emerge from their winter training camps and testing themselves in the competitive arena. It's a chance for some early markers to be laid down and the mind games to start. We'll hear from Keely and Michael shortly, but before that, let me first introduce AW's Managing Director and Olympic silver medalist Wendy Sly, as well as AW's Head of Digital Jason Henderson, to the episode. Welcome to you both.
Hi, Euan.
Hi there.
As I was saying, the indoor season's very much upon us. We're recording this just before the New Balance Indoor Grand Prix is about to take place in Boston at the beginning of February, and we've got events such as Melrose Games and the National Championships ahead this month. Those will lead into European and World Indoor Championships in March, of course, as well. There's going to be lots for fans of athletics to get their teeth into in the coming weeks. Wendy, how did you view the indoors first as an athlete and I guess now as a fan?
I think what's quite different now is that many athletes do actually treat the indoor season as a season in itself. And I think we've said before on this podcast that because of the length of the year ahead and with the World Championships being quite late, it feels that even more of the big names are actually focusing on having a very big and full indoor season in the next few weeks. I think for me and probably many people around about in my time, the indoor season was something you maybe dipped in and out of. So I ran the Melrose Games several times and won it once, won the mile once, and but I didn't really ever train for it. It was just something I did maybe one track session just to get my legs turning over a little bit more quickly, went up around the Melrose Games and then came back and the next weekend would run something like the Gasparilla 15K. Equally, I ran the indoors in Birmingham and then won the national cross country, I think, the following week. So it was never really, for me, certainly a season that I just took as one big block of indoor races and with the training to go alongside it. It was perhaps just a way of testing where I was and aerobically, really.
Yeah, it's how different was it mentally to tackle the indoors? Because obviously it's kind of the same but different, given that it's the shorter track, 200 meters to cover rather than 400 for every lap. The bends are tighter, all those kind of things. How different a prospect was it compared to the outdoors?
Well, I always tell the story of the first time I ran at Melrose Games, and I thought I'd go and see what the track was like the night before, and they were actually playing ice hockey in Madison Square Garden, and they would the next day they would have put up a wooden track which was then 11 laps to the mile. So the first time you stepped on it was right before you raced, and I have to say the first time I stepped on that track, it was completely alien because it was such a steep. The turns were so steep because obviously with 11 laps to the mile, you've got a lot of laps to run, and I'm quite lanky, and it was a bit unusual. That's for sure. I think the tracks these days are much kinder and probably a little bit easier for the athletes to adjust to. But I think for me, it was just really being able to turn my legs over quickly at a time of the year when I was putting in the miles and really focusing on the longer stuff. It felt good. I loved just dipping in and out of it. I don't know whether I would have been quite so enthusiastic if I'd had a whole season of indoor races. Maybe I would, particularly on the tracks now. Yeah.
And Jason, what are your feelings on the indoors? You've covered many an indoor event now, and we've got a lot coming up. As I was saying, how much do you enjoy this aspect of the season?
I love indoor athletics. It's as a journalist, I find it quite a bit easier to cover than the outdoor action because there are basically fewer events. It's a smaller track. You know, for my slightly ailing eyesight, it's easier to see from one side of the track to the other on an indoor arena. And it's something that's just massively grown during my time at Athletics Weekly. Unlike Wendy's raced a bit more indoors than me. I only ever raced once indoors at old RAF Cosford when I was about 15 years old. And it was quite a bruising experience. I found that, as Wendy says, the bends are so tight, it's very hard to overtake. And then I just remember this burning sensation in my throat and lungs after the race because, of course, you're not used to racing indoors at that time of year with the different air. But since then, you know, RAF Cosford was the only track that we had really in those days. And now we've got tracks in, you know, there's the Emirates Arena in Glasgow and Birmingham and Manchester and Lee Valley and Cardiff and you know, smaller arenas with like sprint straights in places like Loughborough, and you know, they're all over the place. So there's been literally a revolution in the building of indoor facilities during the past 25 years or so.
Yeah, and there's a lot of talk in the sport, and we'll get onto it later in this episode, about the growing of athletics, about how it's staged, about how it's presented and everything. But indoor athletics always strikes me as the perfect, not necessarily sampler, but it's a very, very good format to be able to showcase the sport, to show what it's all about to the general public.
Yeah, well, it's always been, I suppose, slightly different. So the events tend to be adjusted for the indoor setting, and it's great to see the men particularly running over 3,000 meters, which they don't get to do very often, and you see some incredible performances. But I think being indoors, being in a small space, as Jason says, where there's, you know, quite an intensity to the atmosphere, it does give you the opportunity to engage with the crowd a little bit more in whatever way that may be. I mean, I think you get to see the field events a little bit more closely. The sprints are a little bit nearer. Everything's just a little bit closer together. So I think if you're going to engage with the athletics audience, it's a great place to go.
Yeah, well, now let's hear from the first of our special guests in this episode, Keely Hodgkinson. 2024 was undoubtedly the year of her life for the 22-year-old. Olympic gold, European gold, British record, and then BBC's Sports Personality of the Year have sent her profile skyrocketing. It was just after that Sports Personality win that she announced the Keely Klassic, an indoor event that will take place at Birmingham's Utilita Arena on February the 15th. Athletes such as Molly Coddery, Jake Whiteman and Georgia Bell have also signed up to take part, but the meeting will finish with Keely going for the world indoor record that was set on the day she was born. I spoke to her in the middle of last month, and the full version of this interview can be found in the February issue of AW magazine, out now. In this extract, I began by asking her about how it feels to have an event in her name. How sort of important is it to strike just now, whilst obviously your profile has never been higher than it is at the moment, but to be able to use that, and I know you've mentioned about giving sort of back to the sport and things, but just to be able to use that profile to be able to promote what you guys do and the wider sport?
Yeah, it's definitely a great opportunity, you know, taking advantage of last summer's Paris Olympics. And I literally haven't raced since. And obviously it came at a great time with Sports Personality that also went in our ways, which I think was great. That was a really good day. So we just want to bring track and field like up there with the other sports, you know, the people that were nominated as well on that night. But, you know, you look at sports like tennis, like we have track stars going to watch tennis, why don't we have tennis stars coming to watch athletics? You know, that kind of talk. Like it's we enjoy other sports, so it's like you can come and enjoy ours. And I think it does need a bit of modernizing and a different approach, a little bit, not too much, because I think the authenticity of track and field is still really good. Having all the events and so many different things going on, that's what it's all about. And it's just modernizing it, I would say.
Yeah, what's the response been like towards it? Obviously, there have been a few, you know, big name announcements as well, you know, over recent days too.
Yeah, I think some people were surprised by a couple of the names. We've got a couple more coming, but I'm not going to reveal them yet. I think I'm going to say that a lot of people maybe don't like change or don't like something new. And I think something new can sometimes scare people, like maybe why am I not involved or what's going on or what is this or and I think some people I've had some feedback of like people thinking I'm maybe getting distracted and I'm doing too much, but honestly I'm not. Like my agencies have done such a great job. I've had the saying about as much as the colorway, the name of it and the pictures used. You know, they've ran a couple of things by me, but they know that my focus is track, and I'm the type of person that would never let anything get in the way of that, no matter how glitz and glamour the outside world looks. So I was a bit frustrated with some of that response, but overall, I think it's a positive thing, and hopefully, I think when people see it, you know, this new thing, we've got a lot of new things coming this year. You know, the new structure with the Grand Slam and the Athlos meet that happened last year. There's so much going on, so I think adding in something else is probably a bit like whoa. But I think it's a really positive thing. You know, we're not trying to change too much. We're not going to mess with anybody's races. We want it to, we've got para events in there, we've got field events, we've got young events, and then we've got the elites running. So it's a real mix of everything, and hopefully it just highlights the great people that we have in British athletics.
When it comes to the 800 yourself, you've obviously been very open about what you're hoping to do, what you're targeting with the world record. How much does your sort of psychology change when it comes to, I guess, being that open or being that forthright about what you'd like to do?
It's definitely been a bit up and down because, I mean, I'll be honest, it has been up and down because I think, a month ago wasn't, you think you have loads of time and then all of a sudden it's January. Like a second ago it was October and I'm like, where has the time gone? You know, I spend a lot of time away from home as well, which makes it seem like it just goes quicker. And I think coming off the back of Paris, I haven't raced since Paris either. Spent a long time off the track. Your body, I'm fit, I'm in shape, but you're not quite that sharpness. You know, I left the track in 154 shape. I'm not going to be in that right now, but we're trying to, work our way there. But I think with me, what I know, I trust in Trevor and Jenny's program that the 10 days out, it tends to just fall together. So I'm just getting the hard work done. I've still got my sights set on it. But if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. I would just love to be able to give it a go. I think it's a record that I've probably been after for a couple of years now. I've been in the shape to do it before. It just hasn't quite come out. And
Yeah.
that's just the reality of the sport. So it would be great. I do feel like it's mine for the taking because it was set on the exact day that I was born, which I think is a really fun fact. So I just love to be able to line up and give it a good go in front of a home crowd.
Now it's time to speak with our second guest, Michael Johnson. On the track, he was a serial 200 metre and 400 metre champion, breaking world records and landing Olympic and world titles. Since retirement, he's become a respected pundit, but also increasingly vocal about what he thinks he needs to change for the sport of athletics to survive in an increasingly crowded sporting marketplace. Now he's doing something about it via Grand Slam track. The first of this year's 4 slams, the events take place in Kingston, Miami, Philadelphia and Los Angeles between April and June, is edging closer. An impressive array of athletes have been signed up. The idea of Grand Slam track is to create a league that sits at the top of the sport, created for the best of the best. It is designed to bring about as many head-to-head battles as possible, and 48 racers are contracted across 6 event groups to run in 2 disciplines at every slam. They will be joined by 48 challengers who will change from slam to slam as well. More information about it all, as well as the full interview with Michael, is in the February issue of AW, but this extract begins with him talking about what it means to be getting the ball rolling on the project. You must be getting excited about it all. It's starting to edge a bit closer. I mean, good place to start was, I guess, is just how things are going with the whole project.
Yeah, it's going great. Right now where we sit at this moment is now I spent a year and a half in, sort of planning to launch, kind of mode. And we launched back in January, and then it was sort of, focused on, all right, now we're in execution mode. And so I'm sorry, we launched back in June of last year. So, it was kind of execution mode after that. And then we're focused on, getting athletes signed, which is the most important thing, right? And so, we got that done, which was, if you look back before we even launched, the biggest thing, the biggest challenge for us was always going to be getting athletes to commit to, competing against their primary rivals 4 times, in a year, and committing to that in advance. That was always going to be the biggest challenge. So we got that done before the end of the year. So now we're just focused on putting on 4 really good track meets. So yeah, it's exciting. Yeah, I can't wait.
Was the athlete signing process easier or more challenging than you were expecting?
A little bit of both. I think, I always knew that before launching this and before even deciding to actually, go and build this business, I always knew that this is what athletes have been wanting, and been begging for, screaming for, like, hey, we want, more pay. We want our sport to look like other professional sports. But I always knew also that, change is hard for people, and I think so, it was a little bit of both, but I think it was interesting because we started talking to athletes. I started talking to athletes back last spring.
Yeah.
And then, we started to ramp that up after we actually did our formal launch in June, which was right before our Olympic trials. And,
Yeah.
And I think what we realized is that, we're going to have to wait until after the games. Everybody's focused on the games, and we wanted to give them that space. But after that, it just started to roll. It just started rolling, and it became much easier. And so yeah, I think all in all, probably, yeah, like I said, a little bit of both. Because like I said, you're giving the athletes what they've always wanted, but you're also asking them to change, as opposed to, like, hey, I'm going to be able to give you everything you want, and you're not going to have to change at all. Like, yeah, you're going to have to change a little bit. And, so, you expect that that's going to be a little bit challenging for people.
Yeah. Has there been much resistance sort of from within the sport, whether that's, you know, um, people that you need to work with to get these things in place, whether that's scheduling, whether that's athletes? As you say, people don't necessarily like change.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're going to always have some resistance, but the fact that we got 40, the main thing, again, the biggest challenge was always going to be getting athletes to come, to commit to this. And we got our 48 athletes, our 48 racers signed, very quickly, relatively quickly anyway, and got some of the fastest people in the world, Olympic champions, world champions. About 48 racers, I think 36 won medals in Paris. So there's always going to be some resistance. So it's but by and large, the athletes are down with it. They love it, and fans absolutely love it. Certainly you're going to get some resistance when you've had a system that's been around for as long as this system for track and field has been around, for athletics has been around, and it's been pretty much the same way. People get used to it. You get comfortable in that system. You figure out how to navigate the system, the way that it is. So, when you change things, yeah, you're going to have some people that are going to think, and feel like, oh, yeah, I'm not crazy about the old system, but I know it, and I know it well, and I know how it works. And now I've got to, change how I operate. And I'm not sure I want to do that. And to get that, that's always the case. And but those are not early adopters, and in any situation with something new, I've been in the tech startup world for quite some time, and you're going to have early adopters, and some people are going to come on later and they're not early adopters, and they're going to be a little resistant, like, I'm not sure I want that. It's not, it's not what I'm used to. But ultimately, they come along.
Thank you to Michael for his time. Now, Jason, the scale of the ambition is clearly there for Grand Slam track, and the 48 racers that signed up already, I guess you could argue, is a success in itself.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting season, isn't it, to see how it unfolds. I mean, obviously we haven't seen any of the meetings yet, so I think all eyes are going to be on those first 1 or 2 meetings to see actually what it looks and feels like. going to be a very interesting season with it operating, kind of in parallel with the events that World Athletics put on, the Diamond League, Continental Tour meetings and everything else, all building up to a crescendo with the World Championships in Tokyo at the end of the summer. So, yeah, I always say that there's never a dull moment in athletics, and I think this summer is certainly set to be a very interesting one.
Well, as I was saying, there hasn't even been not even a step run in in Grand Slam track, and you could argue, Jason, that it's already having an impact, given that at the end of the year, Diamond League organisers announced an increase in prize money for the athletes. Given how lucrative Grand Slam track is, it feels like it has started, a bit of momentum going. Yeah,
sure. I mean, they've certainly got lots of media coverage. National newspapers have been writing about Grand Slam track. Everybody's talking about it. But I think it's almost rare for an interview to go by these days with an elite athlete where they're not actually asked at some stage about Grand Slam track. Are they doing it? If they're not doing it, why not? What do they think of it? What do they think of the concept? The track athletes are asked about it. The field athletes are asked what they think about it, with there being no field events. It's general. It's very much generating a lot of conversations and debate, and that's only got to be a good thing. You talk about the prize money, Euan. The fact that that's rising in other areas now as a consequence, I don't think that's a bad thing. And I remember Seb Coe talking at the Olympics last year. I think he was asked about Grand Slam track, and I thought his reaction and his stance on the whole topic was very commendable and magnanimous, in that he just said that competition's a good thing. Bring it on. The more competition opportunities for athletes, the better. He didn't seem to treat it as some kind of rival competition at all. He just thought it was a good thing, and I thought that was great of him to have that attitude.
Yeah, and Wendy, to get these athletes to commit to these 4 slams, and they have to race twice at every slam, and to come up against many of their biggest rivals, that's a very different change in mentality to what we normally see.
Yeah, although most athletes will plan their season ahead of time with their coach and their managers. So I suppose the only difference perhaps here is it's been planned a little bit farther in advance.
Thank you to Wendy and Jason for joining me, and thanks to you for listening. We'll be back next month for more from the Athletics Weekly podcast. In the meantime, the February issue of AW is out now, available via athleticsweekly.com and selected retailers. You can also keep right up to date with the latest athletics news and events by heading to athleticsweekly.com and following the AW social media channels. Please also like and subscribe to the Athletics Weekly podcast on your usual podcast platform.